Welcome back to part 4, the final part in the sequence on the Y-BAK3071. We're at Plains LPG Services, where today we have dropped off the empty cars that are going to be loaded with LPG, and we're now going to back up onto the cars that are waiting for us that have already been loaded to take them back to Bakersfield. The cars we're going to pick up are on multiple tracks, which means we're going to create a train that's longer than any single track. Therefore, our only choice is going to be to build our train onto the branch line, which will involve blocking the crossing where you saw those cars driving through. We're going to back up to these loaded tank cars and pick them up one string at a time. Getting a little walking exercise in, walking back to the switches to make sure they're aligned for our first cut of cars to pick up. And looks like this last one was not. I suppose it doesn't really matter what order we pick the cars up in. We could have gone and picked up those that the switch was already lined for, but I just want to get them one at a time, sort of systematically. If you're running this local, you could, of course, do it in any order that you thought was best. Now, these are loaded LPG cars. They're considered hazmat, so we do need to be careful. We don't want to bump into them at a high rate of speed or anything, so we get off to protect the movement and make sure that we are guiding our engineer back to the join nice and slow and smooth. The hopper cars you see in the background are not a part of Plains LPG. They're part of Simplot, which we are not working today. Looks like a good join, nice and slow. One blast of the horn means set and centered, safe to get between the cars. Gonna go to the end and see if that angle cock is closed. And now let's start getting air in. You see 190 or so cubic feet per minute, and that's a pretty fast airflow, so we're going to wait until it slows down before we open up fully and start to pull on the cars. The gauges show that the air has released, so even though the reservoirs on the cars are being filled with air, and that's why the airflow is as high as it is, there's no brake pressure, so we can pull on this train. We see the no com, which just simply tells us there's no FRED or end of train device on the back of this cut of cars. The Train Link 2 that you see there is a radio device which basically communicates with the FRED on the rear of the train. We can see the cars that we dropped off in the last part still sitting there, and later the plant switcher will take those cars and place them at the loading racks, one cut at a time. We're using the counter to see how much train we need to still pull before we clear the switch and can back on to the next cut. Still quite a ways to go. It's gonna be close. Looks like less than 200 feet. We may be able to stop short of that crossing and not foul the crossing. See it counting down there. When it hits 0, we can stop because we'll have cleared the switch. But stopping isn't quite as easy as we might have thought, because with this heavy loaded train, inertia is not working in our favor and it is difficult to stop the train. We did stop short of the crossing, but just out of safety and to comply with rules, we did sound the horn in case we would have fouled the crossing. We've come to a stop now. Our switchman on the rear is going to line the switch for the next cut of cars and protect our shove back onto that cut.
BNSF 7540, calling dispatcher 12, over.
Dispatch, over.
Roger, we're at the Needles Yard lead, getting ready to head out to San Bernardino.
Came to a stop a little early, but better safe than sorry with these loaded cars.
Copy that, standby.
And a good join. We pushed them a little bit, but it was 2.2 miles an hour, which is well within the safe coupling range.
Alright, copy that, signal indication.
Once again, we pull across this grade crossing. This time, since we barely fit with just one cut, we know we're going to foul the crossing. So we go ahead and prepare to blow our horn and ring the bell. And the crossing gates are already down. It's going to take us a while to actually cross because we're only making about 3 miles an hour. This train is heavy, given that all of the cars are loaded. It'll get a lot heavier before we're done because we're going to add even more cars to this train. Our brakeman on the ground at the rear of the train, of course, is watching to tell us when we've cleared the switch. I'm running around a lot. For a job like this, we'd probably have 2 people on the ground on the rear of the train. In an industrial plant like this, there are quite a few hand-throw switches to operate. No simple control panel or anything like that. We've simply got to use the Armstrong method. Walk over to the switch and throw the switch handle. In reality, sometimes those are hard to throw. They can get stuck, they can be bound up. It takes a little bit of strength sometimes to pull that lever over. We now ride the rear of the cut of cars, so we don't have to walk all the way back once again, and we can protect the shove, meaning we tell the engineer how close we are and how he needs to slow down, etc. before making the join. We're doing about 4 miles an hour. We could do a bit faster. We want to make sure that we keep the train under control, though. If we go a little too fast, you might have trouble braking, and we definitely do not want to run into a cut of cars loaded with liquid petroleum gas. Might make the headlines in the local paper, and that's the kind of news the railroad doesn't like. We're down below 1 mile an hour. I think we'll need to, unfortunately, put a little more throttle on it. You hear the slack being taken up? Easy does it, and we made a good join. Angle cock is already closed, so nothing we need to do here. With the brakes released, our engineer pulls the cars ahead out of this spur and gets ready to pick up yet another cut. This is going to become a pretty long train before it's all said and done. We throw the switch into the next and I believe final cut of cars. We're going to ride this cut back to make the join. Yes, it's just one more cut we've got to pick up now. Now you can leave a comment if you'd rather I left out some of those pickups because they're sort of repetitive, I agree. But, you know, I wanted to show all of the switching.
BNSF 7540 dispatch. Top signal, main 1, west 10 Needles.
Copy that. I got one that's coming down the hill now. That'll be coming by on main 1, coming down to West Needles behind him. Signal indication. I'm running him around this stuff.
Copy, waiting on one coming bound. Inbound single indication. BNSF 7540 out.
Close the rear angle cock, and since this is the last cut, we're going to put the EOT device on the end too, as you can see. So now we will be able to see the brake pipe pressure on the rear of the train and whether or not the last car is in fact moving. Opening up the angle cock to allow full airflow. It's reasonable, so we can get back to the OC, confirm that we've picked up all of those cars at Plains LPG, and get ready to pull on out of this plant, head back to pick up the cars we left behind in our siding by BHS, and finally make it all the way back to Bakersfield Yard. We pull forward, waiting for the rear of the train to start moving, and there it is. That means we can notch out the throttle a little more.
Got the part of it all ready to go, looking for train crew.
Notice we're out of notch 4 now, and we're about redlining the ammeter, and yet we're barely moving. That's what you get when you have a train this heavy and just 2 SD40s on the point. They're powerful locomotives, but this is one heck of a train. Horsepower to ton is less than 1 horsepower per ton. In fact, it's 0.7, which is not going to give us a lot of power. We're on a reasonably flat branch line, so thankfully we don't need a whole lot more power to get the train moving. Take a look at our train as it departs the Plains LPG plant. Throttling up. Trying to get some speed up here. We made it to 8 miles an hour, so not bad. The branch line limit, I believe, is 15 or 20. It's still 15 because part of our train is still in that plant. We're now in notch 7, which is about as fast as we can go. We're almost redlining here in throttle notch 7, so we dare not take the 8th notch, or we might burn out our traction motors or cause some other damage to the locomotive. Take a quick look at the dispatch panel to see what might be coming our way. We're approaching that little siding, so we're getting closer to where we can rejoin the main line. We're not actually going to run on the main line, we're just going to cross over fairly quickly. But we still will need dispatcher authority before we can enter that main line. We're in full notch 8 now. We're up to a little over 15 miles an hour on this 20 mile an hour section of track. And that's about all we got. We can see the grade crossing up ahead. That's just before the spot where we rejoin the main line. So we want our speed under control. We're going to need to apply brakes pretty soon. We don't want to block that crossing until we have dispatcher authority to enter the main line, because we're worried that the dispatcher might hold us for a while and then we'll be sitting there blocking traffic. Sheriff might come by and give us a ticket or something. In many municipalities, there are rules actually about how long a train can block a crossing. We're actually using the dynamic brakes to help slow down so we don't foul the crossing. All the way into Notch 8 dynamics. Oh, are we gonna stop in time? A little more air. Well, we made it, but we should have been a little more proactive and started braking a bit sooner. It's a little hard to judge with the train as long as it is. See the crossing gates come back up. We're going to reach out for the dispatcher. We're going to tone them up. Releasing the brakes, so we'll be ready to move when we do get authority. Dispatcher, Y-BAK3071. Like to report we've changed our lead engine to the ATSF 5684 East. Over.
Top that, new leader ATSF 5684. Over.
That is correct, 5684. We're now eastbound and we're sitting at Lonestar. Would like authority to enter the main line between East EAST Shafter and West WEST Una. It'll just be a short crossover and back in the clear again in our yard there. Over.
Alright, copy that. Got my permission to enter the main track between ECST Shafter and West WEST Una, crossing from the Lonestar Branch to the storage tracks at 1314 hours. Over.
Understood, engineer and conductor SGD. 1314 hours, and we will proceed. Thank you.
Dispatcher's out.
If you're a prototype railroader, you work for the railroad, then you'll know that I wasn't quite correct in my response. If I'm going to attempt to give instruction on these videos, I better call out my own mistakes as well. I should have said, conductor and engineer SGD of the Y-BAK3071 understands we do have authority to enter main track between East EAST Shafter and West WEST Una for mainline movement to crossover into the yard. It is difficult to get this train moving, and we didn't make it across the crossing as quickly as we thought. Need to turn the bell back on. You might wonder why all the formality of acknowledging what the dispatcher says and all of that. And the reason is, of course, this is only a game, but on the real railroad, lives are at stake, and radios don't always work reliably. As you know, if you've played around with a radio or a walkie-talkie, sometimes it's difficult to understand or there's interference. So readbacks, as they call them, are required to prove that both sides of the conversation understood what the other was saying. Until both sides confirm, the train can't move.
Hey, Wyatt.
8375, it's 15 North Bakersfield, Main Yard.
I have to get out and throw this switch to enter the main.
Okay, and you say right click it? Alright.
Notice the relay cabinets next to each of these switches that connect to the main line. Those are there for a reason. That lets the dispatcher know if any switch off of the main line has been thrown. It's connected to the CTC system and will report that a switch is open on the main line. It'll show up on the dispatch console as a bluish white light, also referred to as a lunar light.
Okay, yeah, it did let me do that. Thanks.
The dispatcher doesn't know or care if any switches that are not connected to the main line have been thrown, but they need to know if anything that affects mainline traffic has been changed. You wouldn't want to clear, for example, a fast passenger train into a block, not knowing that the switch was thrown into the siding and run that passenger train into some industrial track. We set our counter so that we can tell when our entire train has cleared the main line, and then we can report to the dispatcher that we're clear, and then we're sort of back on our own for a while. We can do anything we want when we're in our own yard or in an industrial track or on a branch line, but we can't do anything on the main line without dispatcher authority. Speed limit in this yard is 15 miles an hour. We came off this Lonestar Branch and then we're pulling into the little yard by Baker Hughes. I don't know that that has an actual name. Slowing down because A, we're beginning to clear the main line, B, we don't know the position of the switch up ahead, and C, we're close to the 15 mile an hour speed limit now. Still have another 100 feet to go, so we give it a little bit of throttle. And now we're going to stop. Once again, the weight of this train makes it slow to start and stop. A little double beep says the end of train has stopped moving. Our brakeman on the rear lines the switches for normal mainline movement. The red flag will go away, and then we'll contact the dispatcher to confirm that they have been lined for normal movement. He actually knows, you can see that on his control panel, but that's just required protocol because control panels also can sometimes have errors.
Dispatcher.
Yeah, dispatch, the ATSF 5684 would like to report we've cleared your main line and all switches hand operated between East EAST Shafter and West WEST Una have been restored to normal operating position. Over.
Copy that. 5684. All switches between ECASC Shafter and West WEST Una on the main track line and lock for mainline movement at 1326-1326 hours. Dispatchers WKR, over.
Understood, WKR, connector SGD. We're going to disconnect from our train here, so we make sure the handbrakes are set. We definitely do not want these loaded LPG cars to roll out on the main line. We're going to couple onto the cars that are sitting there ahead of us. Those are the other cars that are also needing to go back to Bakersfield. But first, we're going to jump out here and make sure the switches are all lined for our movement, so when we are shoving a long train, we don't have to run back and check the rear of the train. Also, one of our crew members would get off here and wait by the rear of that train to ride back with the shove or protect the shove. So we throw the switch so that we can back those cars onto the LPG, loaded LPG cars. Line that switch so when we connect to those other cars, they won't foul the switch as we shove them back. So now we're almost all ready for our move. We go light engines, which means engines only. Forward, past the waiting cars, we'll back onto them and shove them back to the LPG cars. We've cleared the main, but it looks like nothing much is happening on the main line right now. Just our luck, it seems like all the activity seems to occur when we need to be on the main line, but that's how it goes in railroading. Just as a reminder, these cars to our left are the cars we picked up in parts 2 and 3. All of these cars need to go back to Bakersfield Yard, where they'll be sorted and sent out in either the east or west direction. Any cars going west of Bakersfield will go out on one train, and cars going east of Bakersfield will go out on a different train. Our job is just to get them to Bakersfield, where they can be sorted or classified and then sent onward on trains that are going either east or west. We see the cars that we dropped at Baker Hughes just to our left. We'll need to stop just past this switch. It's lined for our movement now, but we need to throw the switch after we pass it so we can back onto the cars that are waiting back there in the little yard. Switchman throws the switch for our movement. Climb back on that locomotive and back we go. We look ahead to see if the next switch is lined for our movement or if we're going to need to stop and throw it first. While the closest switch is lined for our movement, the next switch is not. If we moved, we would just go around the cars that we need to pick up. So we're going to line that switch for normal movement. Right now it's set for diverging path. So we can back onto the waiting cars, then shove them back still further into the LPG cars, and then we'll have our final train ready to haul to Bakersfield Yard. Horn blasts mean reverse move. And we make a good join there. One horn blast means set and centered. Safety to move between the cars. We go to the rear first, make sure that the rear angle cock is closed. Then we begin to allow air to enter the brake line. Completely open the waiting cars, but we partially open the air line to the locomotive. It's running out at almost 200 cubic feet a minute, now down to 160. Down below 100, we open up the angle cock fully. 3 blasts of the horn. Our man on the rear knows we're about to move. And here we go. Now you might wonder why sometimes the engineer is blasting the horn and sometimes not. It has to do with the requirement to have 3-point contact at all times. 3-point contact means at least 2 hands and 1 leg if you're climbing on, or 2 legs and 1 hand. So if the switchman is climbing on or off the locomotive, he can't also be talking in his radio, which would require another hand. So when they're getting on and off moving equipment, they generally use hand signals and horn signals, but if they're sitting on the ground, they use radio communication. Since I'm playing all of the positions, so to speak, I'm the brakeman and the engineer and the conductor, I don't have to give my other crewmen radio commands, so you don't usually hear me saying things like, come back 10 feet or come back 20 cars. Once in a while I've done that, but there's another video I shot that involves a two-man crew, and then you do hear that kind of communication take place. So to kind of summarize, what I'm saying is, if somebody is riding equipment and might need a hand to either give hand signals or to get on and off, they don't want to ask him to pull out a radio mic and try and speak on the radio and hear over the locomotive. It's easier for him to give a hand signal and the locomotive to confirm it by honking the horn a couple of times for a forward movement, 3 times for reverse movement, and of course 1 long blast for a all stop safe to get between cars. We're below 1 mile an hour and we come to a stop, which is just fine because, again, those are all loaded cars, so let's be extra careful as we join onto them. Under 2 miles an hour, good join should be fine. Let's take a look at the angle cock. We know the rear is closed because it has the EOT device on it. Partially open, hardly any airflow because those were just recently dropped off, so the equalizing reservoirs are charged up pretty well. We now take a look at the OC to see where in the yard we should set this train out. We don't want to leave until we know where we're going. We're taking a look at the track list for Bakersfield Yard, and we find that yard track 8 has enough room to hold our entire train. 6,731 feet are available on that track, and our train is not quite that long. We notice that the end of train is not yet moving. We're looking for the word move, and hearing a couple of beeps, we see that we are moving. The beeps also tell us when the rear of the train is moving. That means we can take another notch out of the throttle. We're up to notch 4 right now. If you start pulling on the train too soon and the end of train is not moving, then you risk pulling apart your train or breaking a knuckle. We're pulling our maximum amperage. We're only at notch 4, and yet we're only making about 2 miles an hour. This is a even longer and heavier train. You can see the empties we dropped now appear on the OC, so if the plant switcher were to come to work, he or she could then deal with the cars we just dropped off and start loading them up, which is one of the great things about this multiplayer simulator. All of the people work together. I set out some empty tank cars. Somebody else will move those to the loading racks. They'll become loaded tank cars. And then the next local will come and pick those up, and just like we did, and take them back to Bakersfield. And it takes different people can do those different jobs, and it's a very cooperative thing. It's even possible for me, for example, to do half of this local and then tie it up somewhere and go do something else, and a different person could come on, log on to this train, and finish my work. So it feels a lot more real than, say, a game, because wherever you leave equipment, it's there for everyone to see, and it's there when you come back later unless some other player has moved it. Checking ahead to make sure the switch is lined for our movement.
User joined your channel.
Dispatch UP 3521.
Go ahead, over.
Dispatch UP 3521. This is Y-BAK3070, working local operations around Edison. Request permission to occupy Main 1 and then move my train across to Main 2 at North Edison and then conduct operations in that area on Main 2.
Alright, copy that. Got my permission in Main 1 between CP Current Junction, CP Snam Cut, and then permission to cross over from Main 1 to Main 2 at
North Edison.
North Edison at 13:49 hours. Dispatch WKR.
Permission to enter Main 1 at Edison, cross over to Main 2, conduct operations on Main 2. UP 3521 out.
We keep our train moving pretty slow right now because we want to be able to stop before we re-enter the main line. We'll need to contact the dispatcher before we can throw that switch and get on the main.
Dispatcher.
Dispatch, this is the ATSF 5684 East. Request permission to enter the main line between East Shafter and West Una for an eastbound move into BNSF Bakersfield Yard. Over.
Copy that. Got my permission to enter the main track between ECSC Shafter and West WSC Una, headed to CP Bakersfield Yard at 13:52 hours. Over.
Understand, all good. SGD 1352 hours. ATSF 5684 out.
That's that.
Now to get moving again. Not easy with a train of this size. We've got the Sanders on. We've got Notch 2. We're looking for the EOT move. The brake pipe pressure looks correct. We should move. And there we finally do it. Notch 2. Again, not wanting to notch out our train any further until we see that last car is in fact moving. Notch 4. About to redline. Not even making 2 miles an hour. Now we've just redlined. We tried to take Notch 5. That was a little bit too much. We ease back on the throttle. This simulation is pretty realistic, and it'll take a little punishment just like a real train or locomotive will do. But if you exceed it, the train will break apart. I actually have another video I'm going to put together that involves a train with DPU, distributed power units, that's trying to go up a hill, which suddenly breaks apart and then we have to try and put the thing back together without it rolling down the hill. It's quite a challenge. Luckily here, it's pretty flat. Making a big 5 miles an hour, we can take another throttle notch. The goal is to keep it as fast as we can get it going without going into the red on that ammeter. We started the countdown footage counter because we have passed the switch where we entered the main line. There's our train. You see the bluish white light, or it's called lunar. It means the switch is open on the main line. You can also see the eastbound trains that are right behind us. Well, they're a few miles behind us. So we're counting down, and when that counts down to 0, our entire train will have passed that switch, and our switchman can throw the switch back to normal for normal mainline movement. We're assuming that there's a crew van over at that little yard, so we won't need to stop our train. That crewman will take a ride in a van back to Bakersfield Yard to help us finish our switching. Train's moving a little more freely. We're up to 15 miles an hour, which is the most we can do.
443, Omaha 54, over.
Go ahead, over.
We are looking for your authority to open up and occupy Main Track 2 and Main Track 1 at CP Quantico and proceed south on Main Track 1 to Magundon, over.
Alright, copy that. Got my permission to occupy the main 1 and 2 to WO tracks between CP Kern Junction and CP Sandcut on both 1 and 2 tracks. 1358 hours. The dispatcher is WKR, over.
Roger, we have your authority to open up and occupy Main Track 2 and Main Track 1 between Kern Junction and CP Sandcut at 1358 hours and proceed south on Main Track 1 to Magundon, over.
That's correct, over.
Roger, we'll let you know when everything's lined and locked for you and let you know when they're clear of Magundon, over.
We're still restricted to 15 miles an hour because some of our train is still back in that yard where the speed limit is 15. We've got another 2,000 feet to pull before we clear out of that yard. And we're just now approaching the west end of Una siding. We won't take the siding. We've got a high green, green over red, meaning we're clear straight through.
Dispatch, over.
Dispatch 54 UP 8375 in Seiko siding, looking for route south.
Omaha 54 to the UP 8375 south. Do you have work today at Bakersfield, over?
We do. We have set outs at Bakersfield and then set outs at Mojave, pickups at Fleta.
Alright, copy that. Signal indication south end of Seiko. I'm going to line you into the yard, over.
Copy into Bakersfield Yard.
Now they're talking about a different Bakersfield Yard. That's the UP Bakersfield Yard, and we'll be pulling into the BNSF Bakersfield Yard. On the real railroad, a different dispatcher controls the BNSF versus the UP. Today, Wyatt is handling both jobs.
UP 8375, clear signal, here we go.
JVR 443 calling the UP 8375, over.
8375, go ahead.
Just be advised the yard tracks 1, 3, and 4 are clear for you to do your work, over.
Copy, 1, 3, 4, clear. Thank you very much, sir.
443 out.
8375 out.
The UP Bakersfield Yard has a yard master on duty, so he was able to tell the engineer of that approaching train where he can pull in and do his work. Our crewman throws the switch and lines up for normal mainline movement, and we call the dispatcher to let him know we are now finally no longer fouling his main with an open switch.
Dispatcher.
Dispatcher, ATSF 5684 East, like to report that all switches hand operated between East AST Shafter and West WEST Una have been restored for normal mainline movement. Over.
Copy that. Switches between ECAST Shafter and West WEST Una are lined and locked for the mainline movement at 1414 knot 2 hours. The dispatcher's WKR. I lined you in via the West Lead into Bakersfield. Over.
Sounds good. Lined into Bakersfield. Thank you, dispatcher. Conductor SGD out.
JVR 443 calling Yamaha 54. Over.
Omaha 54. Over.
Reporting that all of our mainline hand throws are lined and locked to their normal main positions between Kern Junction and CP Sandcut. Showing to release our authority on track 1 and track number 2 between Kern Junction and CP Handcut at 14:06 hours. We are all clear in the main at Magundon. We'll let you know and ready to come back out about an hour or so.
Copy that. All switches between Kern Junction and Sandcut on the main 1 and 2 through tracks are lined locked for mainline movement at 14:06. That's 14.06 hours. The dispatchers WKR. Have a safe trip down there. Over.
Roger, thank you. Have a good day.
Dispatch UP 3521.
Dispatcher.
Dispatch UP 3521. Just want to remind you, I was conducting operations around Edison, and all switches on main 1 are not lined and locked at this time between Kern and Sandcut. I previously received clearance from you to operate in this area. I have not cleared main 1 yet.
Okay, copy that. Thank you for letting me know. Dispatcher's out.
The dispatcher is actually aware of the track configuration there, so he knows that the local working Magundon will not actually interfere with the Edison local who just called in. We slow down as we begin to enter Bakersfield Yard. We'll finally be getting off the main line here. We now have to manually line all of our switches into Bakersfield Yard. The OC, which we used to check earlier to see if there was a track free, is a website that is available in real time. So if a train had gotten there before us and placed cars on our track, all I'd have to do is look at the OC and see that that had happened. The OC isn't really a part of the Run 8 software. It's operated by a separate server called The Depot. The Depot is a Run 8 multiplayer server that has an advanced version, the Depot Plus, as well as a more beginner-friendly public server. All of the videos I've posted have been of the Depot Plus server.
UP 8368, 254.
Omaha 254. Over.
8368, be okay to take the signal cable?
Yes, signal cable's a good signal. Over.
That's right, thank you.
Taking a look at the yard map to see exactly what switches we have to throw to get into yard track A.
User disconnected from your channel.
I still can't load any of the dispatching territories in. I don't know why.
There's not a lot in the yard right now, but that's one of the great things about this multiplayer server. Just like a real railroad, sometimes the yards are somewhat empty, other times they are chock full and it's hard to find a space for the cars. In fact, sometimes you can't find a space. Our footage counter counts down to confirm that we have pulled our entire train into yard track 8. As you can see, there's still over 4,500 feet to go, so we've quite a ways to pull.
Dinner time. See you guys later.
See ya.
Better have fun.
We notch out the throttle to get into the yard as fast as we can. We're very close to the maximum speed limit, which is 15 miles an hour. I think we're making about 14 right now.
User disconnected from your channel.
We go to the OC to mark down where our train has been tied up, here on track 8. We indicate that our work is completed. And that will finally end this 4-part series. I hope you enjoyed it, and there's other videos on my site for Run 8 and also for model railroads. Hope to see you on another one of those.